Welcome to the Authority Journey podcast. Achieving your most audacious goals doesn't happen by accident. Explore the authority journey and what it takes to influence, lead, and succeed. Today's episode is brought to you by the Executive Legal Professionals, and I have with me today Noel Bagwell. Noel, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what you do at the Executive Legal Professionals, who you are, what you're all about.
Yeah, so Executive Legal Professionals is a professional limited liability company, or PLLC, based in Nashville, Tennessee. We just go by Executive LP. That's our registered trademark, because the other thing is a total mouthful, right? Like, it takes a lot to say that. But my name is Noel Bagwell, and this innovative virtual law firm that I started provides preventive legal services to small businesses. That's what we do in a nutshell. And recently we launched Profit from Legal, which is an exciting business development program. It takes about 6 months, and the client goes through the implementation process that we've developed. It follows our 5 legal E's, because nobody likes legal E's, but they do like our 5 legal E's. And they followed through that process and learn how to profit from having legal support, which really kind of turns most people's expectations completely on their heads.
I can imagine. So what role do you have in that organization?
I'm the founder of Executive LP. I started this firm about 8 years ago, in January of 2013, and I serve as chief legal counsel. And I have a great team of virtual assistants and other attorneys that help support clients on an as-needed basis. So, the team is really flexible. The business model for our law firm was completely rebuilt from scratch, from the ground up. Like, we rejected the traditional business model for a law firm because that just doesn't work for serving small businesses in a way that we believe is ideal. We believe that the business model we've developed is designed around and for startups and small businesses, and that it really is ideal for serving them in their unique needs.
Could you tell me a little bit more about that? What do you believe is the difference or the different need that small businesses have?
Oh, okay. Big question. But
Yeah.
the answer is exciting. So
Okay.
Thank you for asking that great question. I wrote an article for our blog. You can find it online at executivelp.com/blog. You can go to the blog and find this article even today. It holds up, I think. It's called "We Hate the Billable Hour, and You Should Too." And in law school, I was mentored by a man named Tom Stone, who had a PhD in economics from University of Chicago. And he really opened my eyes to the world of economics. Up to my time in law school, I was always more of a linguistics person. I liked languages, learning new languages and things. And I felt like I had to choose between like either the world of words or the world of numbers. And so I just math wasn't my forte. It wasn't my strength. And so I associated economics with the world of numbers. And Professor Stone showed me that really economics is the science of human decision making. And I thought, okay, well, that's intriguing to me. That's interesting to me. Tell me everything I can know about economics and the law. And I took his economic analysis of law class. I booked that class. I got the top grade in that class. And it just really lit a fire in my heart for economics and understanding how people make decisions. And I brought that to legal practice, and I realized that at the heart of economics are incentives. And the incentives for for clients to hire lawyers, small businesses to hire lawyers, were all messed up. And they were all messed up because of the billable hour. And when you think about it, it really is obvious. Like, how has nobody seen this before? That small businesses are not going to hire a lawyer if the lawyer says, here's the deal. Why don't you put $5,000 or $10,000 into a retainer account where it's just going to sit and do nothing until I bill you? And I'm going to bill you at a rate of, on average, $235 an hour. How's that sound? The small business owner is going to go, well, how many hours is it going to take? And the lawyer says, I don't know yet. I think it's probably going to take this amount of time, but I don't know. We'll see. And they're like, okay, so basically you're telling me I'm agreeing to a rate, but not a price, and we don't know what the outcome is.
I
Yeah,
think you
that's
nailed it, actually, right there.
no one's going to do that, right? And so,
Right.
of course, no one's going to hire the lawyer in advance because that's a bad deal. That's not the way that most small business what they want to see, what they prefer is to know what the outcome is likely to be, or at least agree upon a specific goal, agree upon what the value of that is, and then pay a price that's commensurate with the value, right?
So, how has that affected what you offer? What does your offer look like that's different?
So great. So now we're rocking and rolling. I started in 2012 developing the business model for this, right? And I thought, okay, what is the guiding light? What's the guiding question that I can answer for a small business owner that will help me create a business model that really reflects what small business owners need and want? And the question that we asked was, if I was a small business owner, what would I want my relationship with my lawyer to look like? There was a great thinker at this think tank at the National Center for Preventive Law at California Western School of Law who wrote a paper called "What's the Matter with Lawyers?" And his answer was that lawyers typically are not accountable, accessible, or affordable for their clients. And so we decided to change all three of those things. We decided that those were the three problems that we were going to fix. We were going to be accountable to our clients. And for us, that means always using a written contract where we spell out exactly what the client's going to get. And we have accountability to the client. We're going to deliver this, and it's in writing, you can hold us to it. We're going to be accessible. We're getting rid of the gatekeepers. No more, receptionist to legal secretary to paralegal to associate attorney to finally get to talk to your lawyer. You don't have to go through all those layers anymore. You've got your lawyer's number, literally. You've got their email address. You can directly contact them. And we're going to be affordable. And the affordability piece is really, I think, where the real power comes from, the way that we're different, like where we're really different. And it goes back to hating the billable hour and getting rid of the billable hour. If you take away the lawyer trading their time for dollars, then you are really attacking the fundamentals of the traditional legal model. There's this maxim, this aphorism, that a lawyer's time is his stock in trade. I don't know how many times I heard that in law school. I don't know how many times I've heard that from my father or my grandfather, who were both lawyers. I mean, a lawyer's time is his stock in trade. That's what you have to give. If that's what you have to give, forgive me, but your product is obsolete. Nobody cares
Right.
about that
Yeah.
anymore.
You're
No
selling
one,
time and no value.
and
What's
no
that
value.
about?
Well, you are selling. They'll say, well, the value is delivered on a temporal basis. Like, it takes time to deliver the value. There's lots of spin that you can put on that. But frankly, businesses just don't care what you think your time is worth. I was in a continuing legal education, about an hour-long seminar yesterday with a guy who went to Harvard, like really smart people they send invoices to their clients for millions of dollars. Their invoices are huge, and their clients are huge, and their firms are huge, and all these numbers are huge. And it would make a small business owner break out into a cold sweat to even think about paying what these guys charge. And one of the hourly rates that was bandied about in this continuing legal education thing was $1,000 an hour. How do you justify to your client that you're worth $1,000 an hour? And I typed a little question into the chat, and I said, what about legal key performance indicators? Because one of the facilitators of the CLE presentation was saying, well, isn't value very subjective? It's all just very subjective. And I frankly said, BS. It really is not. Value is not subjective. Value is agreed upon by the buyer and the seller.
I mean,
And
that's normal. That's economics right there,
that's
if you think
economics.
about it.
And it's ancient. It's ancient
Yeah.
wisdom. I think it was Pliny the Elder who said, and maybe I'm misattributing this to him, but he said, everything is worth what its purchaser will pay for it.
Yes.
That's very simple.
That's the bottom line right there.
That's the bottom line. Everything is worth what its purchaser will pay for it. But
Mhm.
it's also worth what the seller's willing to let it go for. right?
That's true.
So it's not just one side or the other in a transaction that benefits, and it's not one side or the other in a transaction that sets the terms. It's both the buyer saying, I'm willing to pay you this, and the seller saying, I'm willing to accept that purchase price, or I'm willing to accept that consideration. The thing
Hmm.
given in exchange in a contract is called consideration. So I'm willing to accept that consideration and give you this in consideration. I'm willing to give you these services. I believe these services are worth that, and I'm willing to accept what you're paying. So, really, both parties are made richer in every voluntary, that's essential, transaction. If the transaction's not voluntary, you screw up everything, which is why it's terrible for the government to mandate the purchase of health insurance or anything. Like, we don't want the government telling
Yes.
us you must purchase this, because it really screws up the function of price in a transaction. So when
Hmm.
transactions are voluntary, both parties are enriched, because the person who's selling goods or services is saying what they received is of more value to them than the goods or services that they gave up. And the buyer is saying, well, this good or service that I'm receiving is worth more than the money I'm giving up. So they're both better off. And
It's
that's
a win-win.
beautiful. It's a
Yeah.
win-win. It's a beautiful thing. And price in a free market allows that to happen. It allows for buyers and sellers to both be made better off. So, what we want to do is talk to our clients about the value of legal services that we provide to them and how they can be made richer by having legal services, how they can be better off financially from having legal services. They are paying a price for it, but the service that they receive, we're acknowledging and having the conversation about what it is precisely that they will receive, and they agree in advance. Yes, I acknowledge this is what I'm going to receive, and the price that I pay is worth less to me. The money that I pay is worth less to me than the service that I will receive. It's just that most lawyers don't ever pause to have the conversation about the value that the client will receive, and they don't set a fee based on value. Instead, they say, my time is worth $235 an hour or $1,000 an hour. And the small business owner says, get lost. And they really do, to the tune. And here's a mind-blowing statistic: 80% of small business owners that have a significant legal event go without legal services.
Well, I could use myself as an example there. There have
Okay.
been countless times where I probably should have called a lawyer. Only once or twice among those times did I actually do it. But it's always feels like it from my perspective, calling a lawyer is the last resort.
Right.
I
Well, what made the
imagine that's what your
difference?
clients are thinking.
You're absolutely right. They see it as, don't call a lawyer unless there's a crisis. But can I ask you, and I know I'm the one being interviewed here, but can I just ask you, what made the difference? You said countless times you should have called the lawyer, one or two times you did. What made the difference?
It felt like the last resort. I was at that point where there was no other option. So, I go through all of everything I know. I use all the leverage I own, that I know I have, that I know I can leverage. And then I get to a point, it's like, okay, I can't win in this situation without the law behind me. So the argument is I have to call a lawyer instead of I want to. And I think what you're talking about speaks to that. That
Yeah.
mindset is because it is a last resort. It's an expense that I don't feel comfortable with. And so I'm looking for another option.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of what you just said reminds me of a quote by Sun Tzu from The Art of War. And he said, victorious warriors win first and then go to war. And
Oh,
then
wow.
while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. And what you're saying is that you waited until you were pressed into a battle for which you were unprepared. You were forced to fight a war you had no interest in, and then you were taking the field and hoping to win. Let me tell you, my friend, hope is not a strategy. Hope
That's
is
a very good
not
point.
a strategy. And like, if you're waiting until you're forced into a conflict for which you are unprepared because you have no choice, and then you're trying to win, you are the defeated warrior going to war first, seeking to win. And that's not a place of strength. Instead, it's better to be prepared. We believe that the lawsuits that are crises, right? And a
Mhm.
crisis doesn't start out as a crisis. Before it's ever a crisis, it's a problem. It's a problem that goes unresolved, it goes unsolved, and then it blows up into a crisis. And problems don't start out as problems. They start out as risks. And if you properly address risk with a good plan and a solid course of action, you understand, you see the risk, you spot it. There's this great quote from Dune, the best selling science fiction novel of all time, written by Frank Herbert. It was a movie that I told my friend, you've got to see Dune. It's great. It's a David Lynch film, 1980, whatever. Patrick Stewart's in it, and it's, all this. And so we sat down and we watched it, and it does not hold up. It's bad. It's so bad. It's so bad now.
Okay, note to self, do not watch Dune.
Yeah. I mean, you can, but like have a couple of shots of tequila or something first, right? Like it's pretty rough. They're remaking it. Warner Brothers is remaking Dune. And it's supposed to come out again as a remake later this year. I think in October. I've been looking forward to it for a while. It was supposed to be out last December, but they
Mhm.
canned it because of COVID, and they're going to re-release it. So it's gonna be better. The book is really, really good. But the quote is, the first step in avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence. And when I read that, I was like, this guy's a genius because it's so obvious, but it's something that it's wisdom hiding in plain sight. We miss it.
Right.
And that's true. The first step in evading a trap is knowing of its existence. And the same thing is true of a lawsuit. The first step in evading the lawsuit is knowing of the risk's existence. If you know that that risk is there, it's no longer a legal blind spot. You now know, okay, I need to address that risk. If you don't address the risk and you know that it's there, it's like walking into a trap on
Mhm.
purpose. It's a stupid thing to do, and you don't have to do that. And I was asking my clients, why didn't you hire a lawyer in the first place? This was back in 2012 when I just opened my own practice and before I started Executive LP. I was saying to them things like, why didn't you just have a conversation with a lawyer in advance? Why didn't you have them write you a contract? Why didn't you do this, enter into this partnership that you have created using a written partnership agreement that outlines who owns how much of the partnership and so on? Why didn't you do all this in advance? And they said, well, we thought it would cost too much. And I said, did you think it would cost more than this lawsuit's going to cost you right now? And they said, well, we didn't know. Have the conversation, people. It's really not as expensive as you think, and I guarantee it's far less expensive than the
Yeah.
litigation, the,
I
the
think when you
crisis.
look at it the way you're saying, it's risk abatement.
Yes,
When you look at it like that, it's a little bit easier. But, after being in business for more than a decade, and you've had a few run-ins, you realize, yeah, I would have saved money. But it's always in hindsight, I think, that we think that
hindsight's
way.
2020. And
Yeah.
what we do for our clients is we help them with the benefit of hindsight. We help them learn the lessons from other people. Like, you don't have to learn all of life's hard lessons yourself. You can stand on the shoulders of giants. You can learn from other people's mistakes. That's the wisdom of the crowd. That's the collective genius of humanity. That's real wisdom. That's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is something you learn yourself. Wisdom is something you learn from other people.
I think that's
Be
a good way to put
wise.
it.
Be wise. Learn the lessons that you learn from other people's. Adopt other people's knowledge for yourself. That is wisdom. And wisdom and knowledge are not the same. And I'm here to tell you, wisdom is more valuable than knowledge, because what you think you know can change with one surprise. But wisdom has stood the test of time. Grab that wisdom and use it. And what lawyers have to provide, the real value that they provide, is wisdom. Because they've represented so many clients in so many situations. We go to law school, and the way we learn the law is by reading stories. We read cases, and a case is nothing more than a story of two people who went to court. And we learn what the stories, and we learn the outcomes, and we glean from those stories, those cases, great wisdom. And we can bring that to bear. And it's not just about risk management. It's not just about keeping you out of court and avoiding lawsuits. That's part of it. But really, the wisdom that a good business lawyer can provide in your life is about making your company more valuable. If you hire the lawyer today, your company could be worth more 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now. If you get a business valuation today, the accountant's going to come in and say, based on your income and your assets and all these things, your business, if you tried to sell it, would be worth X dollars today. If you hire the lawyer and you engage in a campaign of asset creation, your business could have more assets and be worth more money 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now. It's also about reducing stress in your life. How stressful is it to try to build a team? Any entrepreneur who has worn all of the hats in their business at the same time and has tried to do their own sales, tried to do their own marketing, tried to do their own legal, tried to do their own budgeting, their own financial planning, tried to be their own CFO, whatever, right? Like if you've tried to do all of those things, you realize, God, I need some help. No successful business is a one-man band. So if you need the help, how do you get the help? How do you pay for them if you don't? I need to hire a marketing person to generate leads and I need to hire a salesperson, but I can't pay the person because I don't have the leads and I don't have the sales. And you feel like you're trapped in this catch 22. How do you structure the relationships with those people in a way that protects them and protects your business? What about your clients? That there's a relationship thread there. And when I'm working with my clients, I say, imagine your business as a wheel, right? And branching out from that wheel, the center of the hub of that wheel, are all of these many spokes to all of the people that are connected to your business. Now, those connections might be client relationships, vendors and suppliers, key employees, whatever. And each of those people might have relationships between themselves. So you have this, every relationship is really at least a triangle in a business. There's the relationship between the business owner and the customer, for example, or the business owner and the employee. And then they each have a relationship to the business itself. So
Right.
there are all these relationships that need to be managed. And each of those relationships have expectations that need to be set, duties and obligations and keeping track of all of that in your head is impossible, and there will be problems that result if you try to do that. You need to use well-written contracts that say, I am going to do this for you. You are going to do this for me. This is the money that will change hands. These are the goods or services that will change hands. And if we have a dispute, here's how it's going to be resolved. Um, One of the services that we offer for businesses that have less than $1 million in revenue is called Legal Lifeline. And Legal Lifeline, just to kind of go back to how we're different and how we get rid of the billable hour, is a subscription-based service. It costs $4,800 a year or $1,500 per quarter. You get a discount for doing it annually. So you might say, if I'm giving up $4,800 a year, what am I going to get for that in return? Well, we give unlimited remote legal consultation because we want you to call us and we don't want you to feel like you're in a cab with the meter running. So we remove any incentive to not call us. If your lawyer's billing you at $235 an hour and you know you're going to have to pay $47 for a 12-minute phone call, you're probably not going to pick up the phone unless your hair's on fire. So we want to give you the incentive to call us early and often, so we include unlimited remote legal consultation service in the plan. We also include all your legal research and basically all the things that lawyers tend to use to nickel and dime and pad their bills. We just include that unlimited. So I had this client who had a problem with two of her clients. She had set an expectation, but verbally in a meeting with the client, and the client either just wasn't listening or ignored it or misunderstood or whatever. There was miscommunication. It was not put in writing. And the client took the result that my client gave them in the business from the goods and services that they'd purchased, and they were unhappy with it. Their expectation was misaligned. They weren't listening or paying attention or whatever. And so a few days after they had received this thing that they had purchased, they went online and complained. They left nasty reviews and they said things that were just simply provably not true. This went on for a few weeks, and my client was very unhappy. And, she said, this is my second business location. And in the previous market where I started this business, I never had problems like this. What's wrong with these people? Why is it so bad here? Why is it so hard to do business here? And I said, well, what happened? And she told me all the stuff that I just said. And I said, okay, so you have a couple of choices, and most lawyers would tell you file a lawsuit for defamation, sue them in court, and force them to settle with you by taking down the defamatory reviews, the negative online reviews, and that sort of thing, and maybe pay you damages or whatever, right? Get some money. And the minimum cost of those lawsuits would be about $2,500 a piece, just a very conservative estimate. So it's going to cost you about $5,000 to litigate this and to take down the negative reviews and so on. Just small claims court litigation. I said, that's what most lawyers would do. You're on a subscription plan with me, and I'm here. My incentive is to resolve however many problems I can for you and deliver maximum value at that price point. And so while it may be necessary to sue them for defamation to get the results you want, I want you to be aware of that there's that risk. I think I can resolve this for you. Just give me a chance to solve it for you. And I'm just going to, like, all the de minimis legal services are included in your legal service plan. I'm going to try to take 20 minutes or less with each of these clients of yours and try to resolve it. In less than 20 minutes each, I was able to reach agreement with each of the clients. So for less than an hour of work, I saved her over $5,000 of litigation. They agreed to take down the negative reviews, avoid the lawsuit, all that nonsense. And I said, let's just reach an agreement. But that's not enough. So we saved her $5,000 by avoiding the defamation lawsuit, getting the negative reviews taken down. But that was not enough, because that could happen again. The preventive legal services kicked in when I said, and let's now implement a dispute resolution policy in your business. So when you have client intake, you tell them, here's our policy. If you're unsatisfied for any reason with our goods and services, here's your process for solving that. And it's in writing, and they agree to it when they become a client or a customer. So
I like that.
You now have this process that you can follow. And if someone just goes online and starts blasting you online, you can say, hey, we've got a dispute resolution policy and you ignored it. You're being unreasonable. And you, by the way, also agreed to mediation or arbitration. So you actually don't even have the right to sue us until you go through that process. You have agreed contractually not to sue us without first trying to resolve it by mediation or arbitration, which is a much less expensive process for resolving disputes. So now we have not only prevented the need for this defamation lawsuit and saved you at least $5,000 for this one incident, but we've also prevented this from happening again in your business, which is going to save you money over and over and over every time you have a dispute. And
that is really interesting. And yeah, it's a lot of stuff that small business owners don't think about at all.
They don't. It's the policies, the processes. It's integrating legal services with your systems, your operational workflows. In this particular instance, for this client, it was integrating legal services into the client intake process, the setting of expectations with the client in consultations, potential dispute resolution. Like, those are all business operations. Those are operational workflows that she's going to have to think about every time. And before, she wasn't thinking about the legal impact of what if this goes sideways, or what if this goes wrong, and what is it every day that I'm doing that has a legal component that I wasn't even aware of. And when we integrate the legal services with that, it has this impact of reducing the disputes, reducing the stress. She knows, if I have a problem, I've already solved it. I'm the victorious warrior that has won first before I ever fight, instead of waiting for there to be a dispute and then trying to win it. So she's less stressed. Her business has, more assets. She's got more systems and processes, policies and procedures, things that she's developed in her business that make it stronger. It's a rote sort of process now that she follows. So if she had someone to come in and purchase the business, she could say, we've already systemized this, we've already developed this. She's one step closer to being able to franchise the business, because she's developed a system and process and a part of her operations manual, her handbook, and all of that stuff. It's been developed. Whereas for most small business owners, all of that stuff exists right between their ears and nowhere else. So if you take them out of the business, you take all the value out of the business. But if you're building something that is part of the business, regardless of who owns it, now it goes with the business. If the business is sold, it's a valuable thing.
That is so interesting. Now, because this is the Authority Journey podcast, what I would be really interested in, I mean, you've talked a lot about how the legal representation can build your value. How can it build your authority?
For a small business owner, imagine the power that you have, the authority that you have when you go into a meeting and you say, well, I think such and such. Okay, just imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine the power and the authority that you have when you go into that very same meeting and you say, I've consulted with our attorney, and their recommendation is that we do this.
That's a whole different level of authority.
Right? Like, doesn't that just kind of gives me goosebumps to think about
Right.
that? Like to think about it's not just you. There's strength in numbers, and there people recognize credentials and expertise. They respond to people who have not just used what Daniel Kahneman would call system one in your brain, the initial knee-jerk fast response system that is based on your impressions and the heuristics that we use for making decisions quickly. But people who have used system two, the slow thinking part of your brain, the deliberate, logical, analytical part of your brain that really thinks through problems in a measured, intentional way. When people demonstrate to others that they have used that system two part of their brain and they've really thought it through, people respond powerfully to that. It's not just, well, I think this. It's upon due consideration and with the counsel of experts, we have really carefully thought through the right answer to this problem, and we have a high degree of confidence because we've consulted with a professional. The ability to achieve the outcome that you want when you bring a professional's power to bear on the problem is increased exponentially, I think. I mean, that's been borne out by our experience. You know, having lawyers is like having nuclear weapons. You know, if one side has one, the other side probably ought to have one.
That's probably true.
It's the mutually assured destruction. At least it's a deterrent. You know, it's like I once got hired to represent a client against a party who was pro se. They were representing themselves. The judge very quickly found in favor of my client because the other side just embarrassed themselves. They didn't show up prepared. They asked silly questions. They did silly things in court. Like they took the witness stand. They asked themselves a question and then got up on the witness stand and answered it and got back down and asked themselves a question and got back. And the judge said, "You can just sit in the witness box. You don't have to get up and down. What are you doing?" Like stow the theatrics. We just want to get to a resolution and get you off my docket. And finally, the judge was just like, enough of this, and he threw out the lawsuit. That's pretty rare outside of small claims court. You never see stuff like that, but it's just an example of how people trying to DIY their legal services end up making themselves look ridiculous, and because they're being ridiculous. Doing things like trying to run a business without any kind of legal support is really just asking for trouble. And, you know, we have put years into developing ways that the cost of legal services can be measured, it can be proportional, scalable. And not only are we delivering a high value service, but for example, for clients that have more than $1 million in legal service, we offer this Signet outside general counsel, and it's an outsourced legal department, and the cost of it scales with the size of the business and the market. So if you're a smaller business, you're going to pay less than a bigger business because it doesn't take as much to staff the smaller legal department. And so we've found a way to make that scalable. But we found that even doing that, even making the cost value-based, a value-based fee that's based on, and how do you know it's worth that value? Well, remember what we said, everything is worth what its purchaser will pay for it, right? So we've looked at what many purchasers have paid for legal services. We aggregate all of this market data, we pull together all the statistics on legal spending every year, we update it every year, and we pull it into a proprietary algorithm that we developed, and we localize that data based on the market that you're in. So we look at what businesses are spending on legal services, and then we have part of our algorithm scales that number. So all I have to do is put in the size of the business as measured by their revenue and where the business is and how big the legal department is based on, like how many lawyers are in it. And the algorithm tells us exactly what that business should budget annually for legal services. And it's a value-based fee because it's based on market data. It's based on what people are actually spending. Everything is worth what its purchaser will pay for it. So we can scale the cost, but we found that that wasn't enough, because I can go to a small business owner and I can say, this is what a legal department is worth to you. And by the way, our numbers usually tend to save the client quite a bit of money. Like we did a quote for a business in Fort Worth, and they were spending about $480,000 a year on, three attorneys, about $160,000, a little more than $160,000 a piece. And, we were able to quote them a rate that would have been about $200,000 less than what they were currently spending. So we can offer significant savings versus in-house counsel in certain cases. It's pretty extraordinary, just the savings that we can use, that we can bring to bear using outside general counsel. But that's not enough. They don't just want to see what the value is based on what other people are spending. What they want to see is, if they spend that money, are they going to make that back and then some? They want
Yes.
to see positive ROI, and we can have that conversation now with Profit from Legal. We can show them how to track legal key performance indicators, how to see what it is that the lawyer's doing for them and how that moves the needle on their bottom line.
That's significant. Okay, now let's back up and talk a little bit more about you.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh, no. Watch out.
Now, you mentioned that your dad and your granddad are lawyers. So did you expect that you were going to be a lawyer? Was that on your mind the whole time you were growing up?
When you're a little kid, I think for many young men, their father is their hero.
Mm-hmm.
And if your dad's a soldier, you want to be a soldier. If your dad's a fireman, you want to be a fireman. If your dad's an astronaut, hopefully your father teaches you something about statistics and you're not terribly disappointed when you don't become an astronaut. But your dad's your hero. You want to be like dad. And for a lot of my childhood, that was my experience. I was pretty typical. But by the time I reached adolescence, I had decided I wanted to be very different from my dad. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to own my own business. I have an independent streak a mile wide. And so I went to college to study business administration and computer science. I was a double major and had an existential crisis in college. Just a lot of depression and just some big challenges, some big mental health challenges. And I was really looking for reasons to keep going in life if I'm going to be surprisingly vulnerable, I guess. So I changed my major to philosophy. So in pursuit of life's big questions and just reasons to keep going. It was just a rough time. So ended up with a BA, a bachelor's degree in philosophy. Bruce Lee also had a degree in philosophy, by the way. I don't know, a lot of people know that. And someone once asked Bruce Lee, what can you do with a degree in philosophy? And he said, you can think deep thoughts about being unemployed.
That's right.
I was like, well,
my son tells a similar joke. You
Yeah.
can ask, do you want fries with that burger?
Do you want fries with that? Yeah. So for me, it was, I didn't want to struggle with resources, with financial resources my entire life, but I had significantly limited my options, or so I thought. I felt like I had really kneecapped myself when I graduated. I graduated from college, got married, and moved to a different state, all in May of 2006. We actually moved to Wake Forest, North Carolina, and because I had decided I would go to seminary. I had a very fundamentalist evangelical Christian upbringing. Bible memorization was a big part of that. And so I had all this religious knowledge in my head. And I thought, well, couple that with philosophy, you can always be a preacher. And so I thought I'll go to seminary, still kind of running in the back of my mind thinking, you probably should be a lawyer. You've got the skills to be a lawyer. You're a smart guy. You like to argue with people. Just go be a lawyer. But I was like, no, not going to do it. Running from it, I felt like Jonah and the whale, run from your destiny. And the whale got me. I was miserable in seminary. I guess wherever you go, there you are. I was still miserable, despite all my study of philosophy. I was still not super happy, and I went to seminary and got really, really frustrated with it. After about a year, I left and worked in luxury property management in Cary, North Carolina, which is just a really nice part of Raleigh, the greater Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill Triangle area. So we were there for a couple of years, had some good years. And finally I said, you know what? Fine. I'll go to law school. For a lot of people, that's their dream. It's like this big aspirational thing. I'll go to law school. I'll be a lawyer. I'll change the world. All this. And for me, it was like, fine, I'll, if I must, I'll go. And so I went to Cumberland School of Law at Samford University in Birmingham, and was living there in Birmingham for about 3 years. And Birmingham is like the civil rights capital of the South. Lots of things happened there. There's a civil rights museum, and it was culturally, even though I was born and raised in the South, it was intense. It was intense there. Birmingham is intense. And I got to meet some really interesting people in law school. I got to meet Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice, on a trip to the Federalist Society Student Symposium. So my wife and I went with some other law students up there, and we got to meet Clarence Thomas. That was amazing. I got to meet Herman Cain when he was running for president. Was just friends with some extraordinary people, met some extraordinary people. Came back up to the Nashville area after that and hung my shingle. I mean, that's how I got started practicing law. It was not aspirational in any way. It was really, if anything, it was like a fallback position for me. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to run a business. I've always wanted to just be my own boss and not have to answer to anybody. Hilarious, ironic, right? Because if you do run your own business, you don't just have one boss. Every one of your customers and all of your clients are your boss. And if you're a lawyer, also the judge is your boss. The board of professional responsibility is your boss. Like whoever's holding your license is in captivity to your, ability to continue to pay for continuing legal education and your annual bar, they call it the professional privilege tax, and all of that. Like if you don't pay, you have a lot of bosses. I'm here to tell you, if you're your own boss, all you've done is trade one boss for many.
That is the truth.
I guess that's my story and my long rambly tale.
Well, a couple of things stood out to me. One is that how unhappy you were when you were pursuing something that maybe wasn't the right track for you. Do you feel like you are on the right track? And do you feel like you're happier as a result?
I think I have learned that happiness and chasing happiness is foolish. I talk a lot about knowledge and wisdom, and I have a lot of what most people would consider to be knowledge. As a classical skeptic, and now I'm going to show my inner philosophy nerd, but as a classical skeptic, I have learned to heavily discount knowledge, because knowledge is a true justified belief. And the part of that that's problematic is truth. You can have all kinds of justified beliefs, and everybody does. You have beliefs, and they're justified to varying degrees by your experience and your reason and the empirical evidence of your senses and all of those things. But what is true? What sense do you use to measure truth? We don't have a truth sense. We can't pick up on it. We don't have this sixth sense for truth. We can't see it, taste it, touch it, hear it, spell it. Truth eludes our empirical senses. And so without a sense for truth, the best approximation we have is consistency, consistency of experience. And one often mistakes that for truth, and including many, many philosophers, they say, well, good enough. It's kind of a kludge, for them. And they're
Yeah.
like, good enough. Consistency is truth. Consistency is not truth. It's not objective truth. It's
Hmm.
just consistency. And the arrogance of modern philosophy to deny classical skepticism and substitute consistency for truth is beyond the pale, and yet we all just take it for granted. We think we know all these things. But for me, I have found that it's far more existentially fulfilling. It gives me more meaning and value and purpose in my life to simply admit three very difficult words to my phrasal vocabulary. And that's, I don't know. I don't know. I believe. And as a skeptic, belief becomes infinitely more important than knowledge. And I will now say, well, I believe this, or I believe that. And by taking that softer approach and not claiming that I know all these things, um, I am able to believe more things and hold more conflicting thoughts simultaneously in my mind, and consider more perspectives and listen to more voices, and really value diversity of thought and diversity of opinion more. Whereas people who really know things, they get just entrenched in their position.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. For me, happiness is like knowledge. It becomes this God, this idol that we put in front of us. I must be happy. I have a right to be happy. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All these happy, 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 happy. And there's a great talk. You can Google it. It's on YouTube, called Smile or Die. And the RSA Animates project did a wonderful little animated version of this talk, Smile or Die. We're obsessed with happiness.
Hmm.
And I think that's so tragic, because happiness really isn't all that important. Whether or not I'm happy today doesn't really matter all that much. What really does matter is not happiness, but contentment. Happiness
I
and
like that.
contentment is to happiness as wisdom is to knowledge. You
Hmm.
really should disregard and discount happiness if you want to find peace in your life, and if you want to find meaning and value and purpose in your life. And you should instead focus on contentment and wisdom rather than happiness and knowledge. I guarantee you will find contentment and wisdom in your life with far greater ease, and it will give you far more fulfillment than if you chase things like happiness and knowledge. Knowledge exists, math, truisms,
Hmm.
tautologies. Sure, you can know all of those things with great certainty, because they're just definitionally true. They just are what they are.
Hmm.
But, the wisdom of, well, I don't really know that I'm not living in a simulation, or I don't really know that I'm not a brain in a vat, because it's impossible to know. But I don't really need to know either. That's wisdom, is I
That's
don't really
wisdom
need
right
to
there.
know. Like, consistency of experience, the wisdom of that is it's just good enough. It's just good.
Right.
It's good enough for me to accept the inputs of my senses. I don't
Hmm.
really need to obsess over whether or not that is in fact objective reality. It's just not an important question to how I live my life. It's not going to
Right.
keep me safe crossing the street. Like, it's
Yeah.
just good to know, look both ways, be wise.
Totally agree with that. So one of my premises is that as you progress along your own authority journey, ideally it's not going to be a total tangle on the way up. You actually are going to set a goal for yourself, and you will make largely forward progress. Um,
Hopefully.
so after expertise, and that would be knowledge, I think, largely, comes leadership, where you're giving back. I sense that you are at that stage where you have found unique ways of doing things. You've found ways to harness your knowledge so you can give back and help other people achieve success. Do you feel that that's true for you?
Absolutely. Just got off the phone right before this interview with I won't drop names because that's tacky, but people in the SBA, at the upper echelons of the United States Small Business Administration. And I was talking to them about a way that I have given back over the last 7 years in my community. I've taught the legal component of the Boots to Business program at Fort Campbell. Boots to Business is part of the Department of Defense's Transition Assistance Program. So when veterans are transitioning back into civilian life from military life, it's extraordinarily difficult because when you join the military, part of boot camp and part of that whole experience is breaking down your mind and rebuilding it. It's just changing the way that you think about things and the power structures that you respond to. It's a whole social microcosm unto itself. Like it's a separate culture, really, the military culture. And trying to reacclimate to civilian culture and civilian way of thinking. And there's often this lack of mission, lack of purpose. And so like when you're in the military, everything is the mission, success of the mission, like, and responding to everybody on the same team, all aligned towards accomplishing the mission. And the mission matters above all. I mean, of course, your brothers in arms, people next to you, and so on. That's obviously emotionally as humans, that's your connection. That's your human connection. But even your brother in arms is right there. He's locked on the mission too. So everything is mission. And when you leave the military, you leave the mission behind, or it feels like you do. And so you have to redefine what your mission is, and you define it for yourself. You're not getting orders from headquarters. You're not getting things down the chain of command. You are the chain of command. So how do you know, what do you do? What do you latch onto? What's your purpose? What's your what meaning and value and purpose? What existential mission are you on? And for me, serving that community and helping at least the veteran entrepreneurs who choose entrepreneurship as their mission to acclimate back into society, back into the civies, not so much just military life, but like civilian life, helping them reacclimate and like pursue their mission of entrepreneurship has been very, very fulfilling for me as a way to give back in my community. I do teach a lot of continuing legal education for lawyers. I teach other entrepreneurs and my clients. For me, it's teaching. My wife says that I really did miss my calling. Like philosophy was good for me, but I should have gotten a PhD and become a professor. She said, that's really what you ought to be doing. Is you love to teach so much, you ought to be a professor. And I've had other friends that have told me, why don't you apply for a professorship? And I'm like, well, because I'm out there doing it, like I can actually, I don't just want to, I do enjoy teaching. And for me, teaching is giving back. And the bottom line, I guess, is I believe information ought to be free and you should charge for implementation. And so that's what I do is for the teaching, that's free. I give that back. All the information, like I'm pretty open about my business model. I'm pretty open with other lawyers about how I do what I do. There are some trade secrets and there's a little bit of secret sauce to it. But by and large, if someone asks me how I do what I do for my clients, I'll just tell them. I don't like hide it or anything. The information is free. That's my give back. That's, hey, let's all share the mission. Let's all get on the same page and have more small businesses on a path to profitable preventive legal support. Because I really do believe that there is a path to profitable legal support for every small business. That is our vision. That's our mission. And the information on how to get there is pretty freely available from us. It's the implementation that we charge for. So when the client they want that for themselves. Yeah, I mean, I got to make a living, so I'll charge them to help with that. We believe that there are 3 levels of implementation. That's let me show you how to do it. Let me do it with you is level 2. And then let me do that for you is level 3. So any of those 3 levels of implementation that you encounter with our business, there's usually a price tag, but the price tag is always based on the value. It's always communicated in advance. It's accessible. It's affordable. It's accountable, just the way legal service should be for small businesses.
So if our listeners want to get in touch with you and follow up about your services, where should they go?
They should go to profitfromlegal.com. That's the landing page for our brand new product, Profit from Legal. They can take our legal profitability scorecard. There's a link from profitfromlegal.com to the scorecard. That's a great way of assessing sort of where you are. Is there opportunity for us to provide a real benefit to you Take the Profit from Legal scorecard at profitfromlegal.com and figure out where there's room for growth. When you complete that, you get a couple of free gifts from us. You get our 5 Legal E's canvas. Nobody likes Legal E's, but these Legal E's are fun. They are the methodology that we use to deliver the Profit from Legal program. We take you through the 5 Legal E's, and it's really good. And the 5 Legal E's canvas that you get for free is a wonderful problem-solving and relationship management tool. It comes with an exercise. You can actually use it. It's our free gift. You can use it. It comes with instructions to improve your relationships and solve problems better. Kind of think like a lawyer kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other gift is our free 15-page Profit from Legal report that just, it's like a little brochure or textbook, mini textbook that helps unpack the concepts around Profit from Legal to help you kind of understand the technical terminology a little more. And there's a link also that we send out when you complete the scorecard to book in for a free 10-minute chat with us, just to connect with a human and, let us hold your hand a little bit and walk you through it, because nobody should have to try to chase legal profitability on their own. We don't believe in DIY legal.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Noel. It's been a pleasure having you today.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for taking an interest in me and for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yes, it was fun.
Yeah, definitely.